Hello, welcome to We 3 Read. I'm Sarah. I'm combining my April and May wrap up because I didn't have very much time to read in April. We went on vacation and I thought I was going to have more time to read, but we were having so much fun. I think I only read like 2 chapters in my book. May's just going to be crazy too, so I don't know how much time I'll have to read then. So I thought I'd just combine them. I decided to be funny and on my vacation start The Vacationers. I had no idea what this book was about. I think I heard about it on a podcast, but I can't remember which one. I really need to start writing down where I get these book recommendations from. So I actually thought this was going to be a romance book about this girl that went on vacation and meets a guy and it's all romantic. That is not what this book was about. It actually follows a family who's going through a lot of difficulties. So my problem is I have a pretty bad memory. So I listen to book recommendations and I think that sounds great and I just add it to my list of something I need to read and then I forget what it was actually about when the person was describing it, and that's what happened in this case. So early on I figured out the book wasn't going to be what I thought it was about. The family goes on vacation because the daughter's going to be going away to college. The son already lives out of the house. It's a father, mother, son, and daughter. And they all have their own problems that they're going through, and other family members may or may not know about those problems. You don't know about the whole problem right in the beginning or exactly what the whole problem is. You get little tidbits as you go throughout, which was an interesting way to write about these problems. It wouldn't have been as captivating if it was a linear telling of each problem. So father's problem, here it is. Mother's problem, here it is. Daughter's problem, here it is. Son's problem, here it is. Now let's go on vacation and they all have these problems. Getting little insights into their problems as they're on vacation made the story more compelling and is why I kept reading even though it wasn't the story I thought it was. I liked how it resolved. I liked how their problems did or did not resolve. I also liked that they had 2 friends with them on vacation. It was a gay couple and they also have their own, not necessarily a problem, but something they're working towards. Don't want to say too much about that. But they add an outsider perspective to these problems and another dynamic, which made it, again, more captivating and more interesting to read. I don't want to go too much into the individual problems of each person because of spoilers, but I will say that the mother and father, their problem is kind of the same, and while I liked the way it resolved, I don't know that I would have resolved it that way. In fact, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't. So it was interesting to see how they got to that resolution because it's not a way I necessarily would have resolved that problem. What the daughter wants to happen happens, and in that way her issue is kind of resolved, but she realized that what she wanted isn't necessarily what she needed. So I liked that. I liked that there was some self-realization. The son was an idiot. I didn't really like him. I know that's kind of harsh. Sorry, kind of. It's really hard for me to be sympathetic to a character that is given so much advantage and so much to start life and then doesn't really do anything with it. The family is a well-to-do family. That's how they're taking the vacation that they're taking. And so he was given so much to start life with and has issues but not issues that explain why he's not doing anything in life and why he's a jerk. So I don't know, really not sympathetic towards his character. I actually could have done without his storyline at all, except that his girlfriend is with him on the trip, and I liked the girlfriend, even though the whole family didn't. I recommend this book. It was a light read, didn't take too long, wasn't my favorite, but I finished it and was entertained by it. I like Nicholas Sparks books. I read them when I just needed light distraction and something that I know will make me feel good, because that's usually how I end up feeling after a Nicholas Sparks book, and The Return wasn't any different. It was your typical Nicholas Sparks book, which I like, and that's what I wanted. So there is a bit of a romance in here between Trevor and Natalie, and like your typical Nicholas Sparks book, there's something that is going to keep them from getting together, and that was a bit predictable. I suspected right away what the issue was, and I was correct, and that's okay. I don't mind that in a Nicholas Sparks book. I'm not reading it because I want to be kept in suspense or be surprised. I'm reading it because it's comfortable, and this was comfortable. But just like any other Nicholas Sparks book I read, there's always something that catches me a little off guard, and this did have that with a side character that Trevor ends up helping. This is definitely spoilers, but I don't know how to describe this without giving at least a little bit of detail. But the book starts off with a wedding and that Trevor is attending, and it leads you to believe that Trevor may not get together with Natalie because you think that he may be at Natalie's wedding. Then you go into the past and you read about Trevor and how he meets Natalie, and also this third person that he meets and how he helps her. But like I said, it's Nicholas Sparks, right? So you hope for the best, and usually that's what you're given. So like almost any Nicholas Sparks book, I do recommend it. It's a good light read, a little bit of a distraction. I almost think of it as like a cleanser palette. Cleansing, you know when you eat something and then you like cleanse your palate? A palate cleanser. I think of it like a palate cleanser. So if I read a book that I didn't particularly enjoy or wasn't just exactly what I needed right then I pull out a Nicholas Sparks book I haven't read yet, or one that I haven't read in a long time, and that's my palate cleanser, and then I dive into the next book that I'm not going to be sure about, because Nicholas Sparks is just comfort, and I know what I'm going to get, and I like that. It's May. The book that this next book I'm going to share with you is based off of is what I'd been wanting to read for a long time but couldn't find it. So the book I read was Still Just a Geek by Wheaton. And it's based off of the book Just a Geek that he wrote about 20 years ago. And I'd been wanting to read Just a Geek for a long time and couldn't find it. I think I found it once on like eBay or something like that for an astronomical price and wasn't ready to pay that, but couldn't find it in any libraries, couldn't find it at bookstores, always searched used bookstores for it, couldn't find it anywhere. And when I heard he was coming out with I'm Still Just a Geek, which is Just a Geek with annotations, I was super excited because it would allow me to read the original book that I wanted to read, but also his annotations from now. The Wil Wheaton in Just a Geek is not the Wil Wheaton I have come to know by watching Tabletop and watching after shows of Trek shows and following him on social media. It's definitely not that Wil Wheaton, and the annotations now definitely are. A lot of his annotations I found to fit into two categories. One, apologies. He would apologize for using words that are not now considered appropriate, but at the time he did consider appropriate to use. Not politically correct language, and he apologizes for that. He was 20 and it was a long time ago, and he doesn't make excuses, but explains and apologizes, and he understands that he would not use that language now and should not have used it then and won't use it going forward. The second category fits into I was going to say discoveries, but I don't know that's right. Probably the realizations that he has made about his family and the impact that they actually did have on him growing up as a star, and how he has learned to deal with that and deal with them. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't know that that's appropriate. He has had some major struggles with them, and they're not really in his life anymore. There's some things I really love about his annotations. He normalizes mental health issues and his daily struggles with mental health issues. He normalizes being a geek and just liking what you like. This took me some time to read. It is a lot. It is over 400 pages, which doesn't seem that bad, except that it is small print. So the original book is written in regular print, but the annotations are in this super tiny, tiny print. And it took a little longer to read because I would be reading the text, and then there's an asterisk, and I go down and read the annotation, and that just takes a little bit of time. It's almost like a research book. And actually he would mention things, and then I'd want to go look it up or find out who this person was that he was talking about. So it was more like reading a research book than reading a fictional book or even a normal memoir that I would just kind of read for fun and it would be easy reading. This to me was a little bit more of hard reading. Like, it took some time. I did some research, and you're constantly, reading the annotations and then having to find your place back where you were. But it was worth it. It was really, really worth it. I found it to be interesting. I found his stories to be thought-provoking. There's criticism of his original book that it was just about Will Wheaton whining that he couldn't get past his Wesley Crusher character. I could see maybe where that was the original book could come across that way. I don't necessarily agree with that. But definitely with the annotations, that's not at all what his point is or where he stands on the Wesley Crusher character and what he thinks of his life and career now. And so it was very interesting to read the details of that. And, you know, of course he interacts with some other famous people, and that's interesting, but really the most interesting parts are just how he felt about being a kid actor and how confusing that could be, and how his family took advantage of that or pushed him, and it's not necessarily what he wanted to do. So it was very interesting to read. It was definitely worth the time and effort to read it. And I don't buy a lot of books, and I actually bought this one the day after it came out because I was so excited for it. The last book I read this month was Code Talkers. Actually, I guess this video is for 2 months, but it was the last book I read in May. So it was Code Talkers, which is about a man who becomes a Navajo code talker. And I really liked this book. Now, I have read stuff about code talkers before, but this was the first fictional story about Navajo code talkers I have read. So this is a historical fiction book. I really enjoyed how it was. I am not going to say his name because I cannot pronounce the Navajo language. I can't even begin to, but his name that they gave him when he went to an American school is Ned. So I like how Ned is telling the story to his grandchildren. So every once in a while he'll say, "Now grandchildren," da 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 da. And I really thought that was an interesting way of formatting the story. Every once in a while it would remind me that this was an old man now telling his grandchildren about the importance of what he did. Because this was kept secret. The Navajo code talkers were kept secret for so long. So he's telling this story to his grandkids, and it starts all the way from when he's a child and sent off to school and told not to speak the Navajo language, cut his hair, given a new name, new clothes, all the way to afterwards and the things he did when he came back from the war, because he knew his self-worth, and he knew he wanted to preserve the Navajo culture. I tend to gravitate towards historical fiction or nonfiction books that are things I never had the opportunity to learn about in school. So I talked about in an earlier video internment camps and how that was something that just wasn't taught in school when I was a kid. And even now, because I have a high schooler, it's not something that is taught a lot or frequently. So for me, it's the same with the Navajo code talkers. I didn't learn about them in school, so it's something I want to learn about now. However, I will say that my 9-year-old, I homeschool her, and she did have a unit on Navajo code talkers, and she was in 2nd grade when we did this. And that's actually how I found this book. I was looking up resources for her 2nd grade unit on Navajo code talkers and found this book for me. I tend to be cautious about my historical fiction. I don't like my historical fiction to be too much on the fiction side. And that's what I loved about this book. I loved the fictional character telling the story to his grandchildren, but there was so much historical fact in this book that I learned a lot as well. And I always love reading authors' notes at the end of a historical fiction book to find out exactly what was and what wasn't based on history or historical facts that were changed maybe just a little and that kind of stuff. We're actually, for this summer, I always do a little theme for my kids, and for my oldest kid, we're doing a Broadway themed summer where she's going to be looking at musicals that are based on historical events. And one of the things I want her to explore is, in these Broadway musicals, which characters are fictional, which characters are based on true characters. And of course, Hamilton's a very popular one, so that's one she's going to be looking at. So as an example, in Hamilton, are there any characters that are fiction? Are there any characters, which characters are based off of real characters? And how are those characters portrayed? Are they portrayed with historical accuracy, or are there fictional embellishments? And as I was saying, I don't like a whole lot of fictional embellishment in my books, even the historical fiction ones. That's just how I gravitate towards historical fiction. And this one didn't have too much embellishment on the fictional side, and I appreciated that. It's definitely a book I recommend for everyone, and a subject I think should be out there more. So there is one book I stopped reading and put aside, and that was Middle Game. And I want to make it very clear, I still think I'm very interested in reading this book, but I picked it up after reading Still Just a Geek, which was a lot to get through, and as I said, wasn't just straight fun reading, it was research and reading annotations. And then I picked this up, and it was just a lot, and I could not get into it, which breaks my heart because I'd been looking forward to reading it for so long. I don't like not going back to a book unless I can pinpoint in my brain why I don't want to go back to the books. As I was thinking about it and trying to figure out if this was a book I was going to go back to or not, I realized I just couldn't, my brain wasn't ready to go into a purely fictional place after reading Still Just a Geek. I needed kind of like a bridge and something that was easier to read. Middle Game is definitely something I plan on going back to in the future when my mind is there a little bit more, but not what I needed right now. So it's not a I'm not going to finish book, it's that I'm going to put it aside for a little bit later book. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on these books, and I hope you will end up picking some of them up and reading them. Let me know if you liked Middle Game. Maybe that'll help me get into it a little bit sooner than forgetting about it. I hope I don't. I put it on my list, so hopefully I'll get back to it pretty soon. And thanks for watching.